Spain still reeling this Thursday night from a deadly catastrophe.
I've never seen something like that.
The overwhelming grief and the Canadian teenager who is stranded.
It's crazy.
Alberta's sweeping changes to sex ed and the rights of trans and gender diverse people.
Our government is introducing 3 pieces of legislation.
Whom the Premier is catering to, plus the backlash. Pleading for peace.
We just can't wait for this to end.
We need an immediate ceasefire.
The common ground among 2 Canadians on opposing sides of the Middle East conflict. And getting to know the moon's dark side, how Canada is gearing up to explore where it's never gone before.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The catastrophic flooding in Spain is the worst disaster in generations, and at least 158 people were unable to escape the deluge. Those who survived say their towns look like sets from a disaster movie. We all know someone who has died, says one resident. Mud and water roared through the streets and businesses, and in some places people are lining up for fresh water. Wide swaths of the country are without electricity. The scope of the damage is visible from space. This is the Valencia region earlier this month, before the flash flood, and this is it after. A year's worth of rain in 8 hours has transformed the landscape. More than 1,200 Spanish rescue and recovery teams are doing what they can, but bridges, rail lines, and roads are washed out, and now new weather warnings are in force in Spain. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight.
2 days on, and the cleanup work is only getting started. Destroyed possessions piled up all across this part of Spain.
We're not going to be able to even start repairing. I can't even contact my work. No one in this area can contact each other because we have no internet.
It's only from the air that the scale becomes clear. It will take years for this region to recover. By some estimates, it could become Spain's most expensive natural disaster ever. The human cost, however, can't be estimated. It's still uncertain how many people are missing.
She was very well known here and very loved too. And
Carlos Garcia told Global News 2 good friends of his are among 6 people missing and presumed dead in his village.
Maybe 50% of the town is damaged or seriously damaged.
Garcia says civil protection officers ordered him to leave Tuesday. Those who got warning text messages say they came far too late, leaving many people stranded in their cars through the night. This man says he saw bodies float past as he waited for help. The destruction has suspended many train services indefinitely.
I had to sleep in the train station and I was soaked, I was cold.
Bruce Hilborn-Silver is 18. The Canadian soccer player is stuck in Madrid trying to get back to his home in Valencia, but he also feels lucky.
Some guys on the team lost their house. There's lives being lost, of course. It's crazy.
With rain still falling in many areas, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez warns people to stay home. For now, though, thousands are in survival mode, with little idea of what the future will hold. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The question after extreme weather events is always, is human-induced climate change to blame? Well, a relatively new group of climate scientists from around the world called World Weather Attribution is working to give quicker, robust scientific answers. Its rapid analysis of the Spanish flood suggests global warming made the event twice as likely to happen and the downpours considerably more intense. And a deeper analysis of the 10 deadliest extreme weather events in the last 20 years, which contributed to about 570,000 deaths, shows they were all intensified by human-caused climate change. The group's co-founder says with every fraction of a degree of fossil fuel warming, the atmosphere can hold more moisture, leading to heavier bursts of rainfall. Politics in the U.S. has never been more polarized, and months of intense campaigning has apparently barely moved the needle for either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Opinion polls show them in a virtual tie. They also reveal a stark gender divide. Donald Trump has a huge lead among male voters, and polls show Kamala Harris has a commanding 14-point lead with female voters. And women are turning out in bigger numbers than men in early voting. Jackson Proskow looks at what's behind the gender divide.
America's political split has exposed a gender divide. You can see it in who's turning out for early voting.
Certainly women are enthusiastic and engaged, and particularly progressive women are feeling motivated to come out and vote this cycle.
Donald Trump is the reason why. From his most recent comments,
I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not,
to the offensive ads run by his supporters.
Kamala Harris is a C word.
This one is funded by billionaire Elon Musk.
She's a tax-hiking, regulation-loving, gun-grabbing communist.
Yet for many women, the biggest issue remains reproductive rights, after abortion protections were repealed by Trump's hand-picked Supreme Court justices.
we've gotten what everybody wanted.
That's turning off more and more women. And if he loses, it's going to be because a lot of women came out and voted against him.
Though Kamala Harris has rarely acknowledged her own gender as part of her historic campaign, she continues to make women's issues central.
It actually is, I think, very offensive to women in terms of not understanding their agency, their authority, their right and their ability to make decisions about their own lives.
And Democrats believe there are even secret Harris voters out there.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose.
Who can be persuaded to break from their Trump-supporting husbands.
You can vote any way you want. And no one will ever know.
With just 5 days to go, Trump will have to hope he can close that gender gap. Because in this election, the keys to the White House may rest in the hands of American women. Donna?
Jackson Proskow in Washington, thanks. And Elon Musk can carry on giving away $1 million to registered voters, at least for now. Philadelphia's district attorney attempted to have it stopped immediately, but the matter is now in the hands of a federal judge, and it likely won't be resolved before Tuesday's vote. Earlier today, Musk, who is campaigning for Trump, was a no-show at a court hearing about the lawsuit. Musk and his political action committee have been offering cash prizes to registered voters in swing states who sign a petition, something U.S. officials suggest may break electoral law, though Musk denies he is breaking any rules. On Tuesday, we'll have live coverage of America Votes, a Canadian perspective on this historic election. We will be streaming live from Washington, D.C., beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, wherever you watch Global News. That includes BC One, globalnews.ca, YouTube, the Global TV app, Pluto TV, and Prime. There are sweeping changes coming to Alberta that critics say are aimed at catering to social conservatives and fringe elements in the governing United Conservative Party. Premier Danielle Smith says the legislation, including restrictions on gender-affirming healthcare and sex education in schools, will protect children and preserve choice. Heather Yurix-West explains what's being changed and why, plus why those opposed to it intend to challenge it in court.
Today, our government is introducing 3 pieces of legislation that will set up guardrails to protect the health and safety of Alberta youth.
Alberta's legislation bans the prescription of puberty blockers and other gender-affirming health care for children under 16, while requiring parental consent for students to change their names or pronouns in school. It also restricts curriculum on sexual education, orientation, and gender diversity, and requires sports organizations prevent trans athletes from competing in leagues unless they're designated co-ed.
We've seen all of these policies in states before, but as far as I'm aware, no single government has sought to pursue them all at once.
EGAL Canada says it plans to challenge all of Alberta's new legislation in court.
On the basis of multiple rights violations and egregious harm, we'll be able to build out a legal challenge.
The UCP government says it consulted widely before drafting the new laws, asking supporters from the transgender community to speak publicly Thursday on the legislation's behalf. Kelly Lynn Peary says transitioning to male as an adult was something she came to regret.
I simply cannot understand how, if I, as a 37-year-old woman, with a post-secondary education, wasn't ready to make such a life-altering decision. How can we possibly support, encourage, or allow our children to do so?
But research has shown that only a small percentage of people who transition say they regret their decision later in life. Instead, parents like Haley Ray believe the new laws give kids less choice.
It is removing an option, access to affirming healthcare, access to knowledge and options, and allowing people to decide what it is best for them to move forward.
It's why, she says, a growing number of families with transgender children are now grappling with whether Alberta is a place they can stay. Heather Yurex, West Global News, Calgary.
The RCMP says it has busted what it calls the largest and most sophisticated drug super lab in Canada. Investigators in British Columbia seized fentanyl and meth, cocaine, MDMA, and other chemicals. 89 firearms were also seized, along with explosives, ammunition, and $500,000 in cash. The RCMP says coordinated raids were launched across the Vancouver area and at a rural property in Falkland in the province's central interior. It's believed a transnational organized crime group is behind the so-called super lab. At least one person has been charged. Finding common ground in the Middle East conflict. Coming up, meet two Canadians divided on the war but united in their calls for peace. Lebanon's Ministry of Health says at least 6 people have been killed, including medics, in Israeli attacks on southern and eastern Lebanon. The IDF says the strikes were partly in response to about 60 rockets and drones fired at northern Israel in the past 24 hours. Most were intercepted, but 7 Israeli civilians were killed, making it one of the deadliest Hezbollah attacks in months. Today, 2 U.S. special envoys met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss a possible ceasefire deal with Hezbollah. Talks are reportedly centered around implementing a 60-day pause in fighting in southern Lebanon, a break many on the ground are pleading for. Jeff Semple spoke to 2 Canadians who are on different sides of the conflict, but both are calling for peace.
These 2 Canadians are on opposite sides of the Israel-Lebanon border, but their paths run parallel. Israeli-Canadian Ora Bar was born and raised here in northern Israel, reuniting with her grandma after a long absence.
It feels really emotional. I think that coming back here really forced me to face my whole life story. That's her birth certificate.
She says her childhood was idyllic until 2006. The last time Israel and Lebanon went to war. Dozens of Israelis and 1,200 Lebanese were killed.
This is the bomb shelter.
Bar was 8 and remembers hearing explosions and sleeping in a bomb shelter.
Every morning, waking up, I wasn't sure if the rest of the house was there. The sounds of war, it's really like the soundtrack of hell.
When she started having panic attacks, her parents moved the family to Canada. At the same time, in 2006, Lebanese-Canadian Ahmed Arajay was with his family in Beirut. He was 9.
I remember when aircrafts were flying over our house, I used to cry hysterically because I knew something bad was about to happen.
His family escaped to Ottawa, where he grew up. Last summer, he returned to Lebanon, reuniting with his grandmother. When Israel started bombing the country again, Arajay decided to stay and volunteer with the aid effort.
There is a humanitarian crisis going on. People are in desperate need of aid.
Bar also recently moved back to Israel after graduating from Montreal's Concordia University. After October 7th, Bar set up this campus display for the Israeli hostages.
Are you justifying genocide?
They were confronted by another student who grabbed the Israeli flag, sparking a brawl.
I felt like I couldn't breathe in Canada.
She too is now volunteering, supporting Israeli farmers and families whose loved ones were killed by Hamas. Visiting her own family home near the Lebanese border, we hear gunfire and explosions.
Don't like those sounds. Oh,
For the past year, villages in northern Israel have been abandoned, too dangerous for residents to return.
I don't want to every day feel like I'm conquering life and I'm resisting death. I just want to exist, you know? And I know that the people on the other side of those borders as well.
Two Canadians on opposite sides of war calling for peace.
We just can't wait for this to end.
We need an immediate ceasefire because the people here can't handle the war anymore.
Jeff Semple, Global News, Shlomi, Israel.
In Ukraine, a Russian-guided bomb has killed 3 people, including 2 teenage boys in Kharkiv. At least 35 other people were injured, and rescuers are still searching the rubble of the apartment that was hit on Wednesday. Kharkiv, which is not far from the Russian border, has frequently been targeted by Russia throughout its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia wants a ridiculous amount of money from Google. A Moscow court has ordered YouTube's parent company to pay $20 decillion in fines. That's a 2 followed by 34 zeros. It's a lot more than the entire world's GDP. Russian media claims the fine is the total amount demanded by 17 state news outlets whose content is blocked from YouTube. Even the Kremlin, though, admits it is a symbolic number, more than a sum it expects to receive. Google says it has ongoing legal matters with Russia. A mock moon in Montreal ahead, testing Canadian technology before a lunar voyage. Canada is playing a key role in the first space race in more than 50 years. For the first time, a Canadian rover will explore the moon in search of water ice, something that's considered vital to the future of space exploration. Touria Izri reports.
Deep craters, dark shadows, eerie quiet. This may seem like the surface of the moon. It's actually suburban Montreal and a testing ground for a Canadian first.
Well, this is it. This is our moon yard.
Canada's space agency is getting ready to explore the dark side of the moon, using homegrown technology to navigate one of the most unforgiving terrains in the solar system.
The attempt being to be as realistic as we can, to try to do what we're doing right now, which are guidance and navigation tests.
This is a prototype created by Ontario company Canadensis, and one piece of Canadian tech playing a crucial role in NASA's Artemis program, which will include Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen's upcoming lunar voyage.
Being able to lead Canada's first rover mission to the moon is just yeah, we're just thrilled with that.
The Canadian Space Agency has tried to replicate the surface of the moon as best it can here, but there are some things it can't replicate. The rover will have to withstand temperatures as hot as 100 degrees and as cold as -200.
Then, peer into those shadowy pockets in search of a key component, ice containing water, which could possibly be used to produce fuel.
There's a lot of oxygen all over the moon, but we, until recently, believed that there was no hydrogen there. Now it seems that it's there, and we believe that it's in frozen water ice. But without going there to actually see if that's really the case, we don't know.
Getting there is still a few years away, 2026 at the earliest.
Let's say that at the end of the decade, it's likely that the rover will be at the surface of the moon with a Canadian flag on it.
The next great leap in lunar travel, with Canada involved every step of the way. Touria Izri, Global News, Longueuil, Quebec.
The LA Dodgers pulled off a dramatic comeback to win the World Series last night, beating the New York Yankees. It is LA's 8th World Series title. Much of the hype was focused on superstar Shohei Ohtani, but it didn't take long for a player named Freddie Freeman, a dual Canadian-American citizen, to steal the spotlight. He's the first Canadian to be named World Series Most Valuable Player. And as Eric Sorensen explains, his personal life and his attachment to Canada makes his story even sweeter.
In a World Series teeming with storylines, it's the story of a Canadian-American that tops them all. Freddie Freeman outshone all the big names, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, in a matchup steeped in history, Dodgers-Yankees. Coming off an injury, Freeman won the opening game with the first walk-off grand slam in World Series history. He sparkled in every game, easily winning the Most Valuable Player award and a World Championship. What's remarkable is Freeman's deep attachment to Canada. Born and raised in California, he nonetheless plays for Canada in world competition. His parents were from Windsor and Peterborough, Ontario. His mom died when he was 10 of skin cancer. It's why he wears long sleeves even in the LA heat.
Every time I put on my tight sleeves, it makes me think of her. My mom is as Canadian as you can get.
And so, as a dual citizen, he chose to play for Canada to honor her.
Pretty much everything I do is for my mom, and this is what I feel is right. I have 3 boys of my own now, and she had 3 boys, so I try to, what she showed me in the hardest time of her life is what I'm trying to do in my life now.
In fact, Freeman faced terrible hardship this season. His son Max was seriously ill for weeks with Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's been an emotional roller coaster and puts a World Series celebration in perspective.
Ultimately, Maximus is doing really, really well right now. With him doing really well now, it does mean a little bit extra.
Freddie Freeman has been through emotional ups and downs, an American hero in America's game who could hardly be more Canadian. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Here Canada is an annual tradition in Ottawa, Rideau Halloween. Trick-or-treaters can uncover the thrills and chills of Rideau Hall and get some candy along the way. Thanks for watching. Sophie Louie will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you next week from Washington, D.C. with live coverage of the U.S. election. Bye-bye.